Daniel's small ranch sat on the edge of the reserve, a good 20 miles from the nearest road. It wasn't built for miracles, it was built for peace. Quiet mornings, golden sunrises, and the occasional wandering deer were the highlights of his days. But now, something else had taken over his life. The foal, whom he'd started calling Spirit, was healing. Every morning, Daniel would rise early to tend to her. He'd wrap her leg with soft bandages, carefully apply salve, and speak in low, calm tones as she nibbled at hay. She responded to him like she'd known him her whole life, resting her head on his lap as if seeking warmth. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was what happened on the third morning. He was sipping his coffee, staring out toward the field beyond his barn, when movement caught his eye. He lowered the mug slowly. At the tree line, there they were. The herd. The same Mustangs that had vanished into the storm 3 days ago. Daniel stepped out slowly, unsure if he was dreaming. But no, there they stood. The same massive black stallion at the front, his head high. Behind him, the dappled mare, eyes fixed on the barn. Spirit neighed softly from inside, and Daniel turned to see her hobbling to the stall door. "No way," he muttered. They followed her here. He opened the gate and let Spirit step outside slowly. Her leg had improved, though she was still limping. As soon as she reached the pasture, the mare trotted forward, crossing the distance with swift grace. Daniel stood, frozen, as mare and foal reunited once more. But again, the mare didn't try to take her away. She simply stood beside her. The black stallion stepped forward next. His eyes scanned Daniel, not with the suspicion Daniel expected, but with what almost looked like gratitude. Daniel couldn't believe it. He stepped back slowly, giving them space. But they didn't flee. They lingered. And from that day on, they came every morning. At first, it was just the mare and the foal grazing on opposite sides of the fence. Then the stallion began to pace nearby. Then the whole herd. Daniel started setting out extra water. They drank it. He laid out some feed. They accepted it. A rhythm began, an unspoken bond. Neighbors didn't believe him when he told them. Wild horses don't behave this way. They avoid people. They fear fences. But these horses, they returned. There was something more going on. One afternoon, as Daniel knelt to change Spirit's wrapping, she let out a sharp cry. Her leg had swelled. His heart sank. Infection? He checked her temperature. Too warm. He rushed inside, gathered antibiotics, and called his vet. "You saved her once," the vet said, arriving an hour later. "But this might be harder. Her leg needs more than bandages now. She's got to stay off it." So Daniel built her a sling. A crude one at first, made of ropes and blankets, letting her rest while still standing. It wasn't pretty, but it helped. She leaned into it, exhausted but safe. That night, the storm returned. Wind screamed past the windows. Lightning forked across the fields. Daniel stood on his porch, watching the trees sway, praying the barn would hold. And then he saw them again. The herd. In the storm. They didn't scatter. They didn't seek shelter. They stood, surrounding the barn, forming a living wall against the wind. Daniel stepped into the rain. Heart pounding. He approached the stallion, who stood firm as thunder rolled. For a moment, Daniel raised a hand. The stallion didn't flinch. Instead, he lowered his head and nudged Daniel's palm. The connection was real. Spirit neighed from inside the barn, a soft but clear call. And the stallion replied. They weren't just protecting her. They were standing with her. That night, something unspoken passed between man and beast. Daniel didn't sleep. He sat in the barn beside Spirit, watching her chest rise and fall, the storm raging outside, the herd standing guard. By morning, the sun returned. The storm broke, and Spirit, miraculously, stood on her own again. She took a shaky step forward, then another. Daniel's eyes welled up. Outside, the stallion whinnied, long and loud. Spirit replied. The herd had waited. And now, something told Daniel they were preparing for something more. He stepped outside, unsure of what the day would bring. But deep down, he knew. He was part of their world now, whether he was ready or not. The wind howled across the open plains as the storm rolled in. Dark clouds bruising the sky and streaks of lightning cracking like whips against the horizon. Most people would have turned back. Most wouldn't have left their truck, let alone stepped into the middle of wild Mustang country. But he did. Daniel had seen something through the rain that he couldn't ignore. A tiny figure limping near a rocky slope, soaked and shivering. A foal. Alone. Injured. He slammed the truck door behind him and sprinted through the wet grass, mud clinging to his boots as he reached the foal. Its leg was twisted unnaturally, and its soft eyes were filled with confusion and pain. "Hey, easy now, backslash. I've got you," Daniel whispered, kneeling beside it. The wind didn't let up, and neither did the rain, but he stayed there, shielding the fragile creature with his own body. This wasn't how he planned to spend his afternoon. He'd come out here to photograph the herd, something he'd done for years. He knew these lands, knew the stories of the wild horses, the pride of the region. But nothing in his experience prepared him for this moment. Kneeling beside a newborn Mustang, heart pounding, unsure if the mother would charge him from the shadows. Minutes passed. The foal whimpered and tried to move, but the pain made it stumble. Daniel gently scooped it up in his arms, flinching as lightning struck a nearby tree. He turned and started the slow, difficult trek back to the truck. Then he heard it, a low snort. He turned around. There, emerging from the mist, stood the herd. At least 24 wild Mustangs. Their coats glistened with rain, manes whipping in the wind, eyes fixed on him like sentinels of something ancient and sacred. At their front stood a colossal black stallion, the lead. He pawed the ground, huffing, tail lashing. Daniel froze, holding the trembling foal close. His heart thudded louder than the thunder. Wild Mustangs weren't known to forgive human interference, especially not with one of their young. He expected them to charge. Instead, they stood there, watching. The stallion stepped forward, closing the distance. Daniel didn't breathe. Couldn't. Then the stallion did something that stunned him. He dipped his head low, not aggressively, almost respectfully. The other horses followed suit. One by one they approached, not in rage but in quiet recognition. A mare with a similar dappled coat to the foal came the closest. Her eyes met Daniel's, then moved to the baby in his arms. Her soft whinny was mournful, questioning. Daniel lowered the foal to the ground gently. The mare stepped closer, touched noses with the foal. The little one neighed in return, recognizing her. "Is this your baby?" Daniel whispered, awestruck. The mare nuzzled the foal, licking its soaked fur. She circled it protectively, then turned back to Daniel. For a moment, he swore her eyes softened. But then, just as quickly, the stallion snorted again, and the entire herd turned their backs and began to move. Except the mare. She stayed, and Daniel knew then she wasn't rejecting her foal. She was entrusting him. With trembling hands, he lifted the foal again and walked back to the truck, the mare following him, step for step, the rain now easing as if the sky itself was watching. He didn't understand it then, but he would soon learn. Saving this foal had tied him to something bigger than he ever imagined. As he reached the truck and gently laid the foal in the bed, he looked back one last time. The mare was gone, but the stallion now stood at the edge of the field, staring. Not with anger, with something like approval. And that was just the beginning. The next week passed like something out of a dream. Every morning, Daniel woke not to silence, but to the distant sound of hooves. The wild Mustangs were no longer just visitors. They had become guardians, neighbors, family. Spirit's limp faded more each day. Her strength returned, and with it, a new energy. She trotted now. Sometimes galloped in bursts around the barnyard, her leg nearly fully healed. And always, always the dappled mare was near. Daniel had begun calling the mare Luna, inspired by the moonlight shimmer of her coat. He never expected to name a wild horse. And yet, she responded to it. The herd remained close, grazing just beyond his fences, never breaking the invisible line of respect between their world and his. The stallion, who Daniel had begun calling Titan, watched him with a steady gaze, neither threatening nor passive. There was understanding in those dark eyes, an awareness that Daniel still couldn't explain. Then one morning, the peace shifted. It started with a sound, distant, mechanical. An ATV. Daniel frowned and stepped onto the porch. 2 men in camouflage were riding fast through the edge of the preserve. Poachers. His heart sank. He'd heard rumors about illegal horse trafficking in other parts of the state, but it had never come this close to home. Without a second thought, Daniel grabbed his phone, his boots, and sprinted toward the ridge. The herd was down there, Spirit too. He waved, shouted, trying to spook the poachers off. They slowed but didn't stop. One of them lifted a rifle. Not to shoot, but to intimidate. Daniel kept going. Before he could reach them, something incredible happened. Titan reared, bellowing a furious cry that echoed through the hills. The entire herd thundered into motion, forming a wall between the poachers and the foal. Luna darted in front of Spirit, protecting her. Daniel didn't stop running. He waved his arms, screamed louder. "You're on protected land. Leave now." The poachers hesitated. One looked nervous. The other revved the ATV. Then, from the trees behind Daniel, a sheriff's truck came roaring up the slope. Flashing lights. Sirens. Backup had arrived. The poachers turned tail and disappeared, tires spinning mud as they fled into the distance. Daniel collapsed to his knees, breathless. Titan snorted again, then walked forward slowly. This time, when Daniel reached out, the stallion didn't just lower his head. He pressed his forehead to Daniel's. A moment passed between them that words couldn't contain. "Thank you. We trust you. You're one of us now." That night, Daniel didn't go back inside. He set up a chair near the pasture and sat under the stars, watching the silhouettes of the herd blend with the land. Spirit slept peacefully in the straw beside Luna. He thought about what had just happened, what it all meant, how an act of compassion had changed everything. He hadn't just saved a foal. He'd been accepted by one of the wildest and most mysterious forces of nature. And maybe in some quiet, sacred way, he'd been saved too. In the days that followed, reporters came. Wildlife officials too. They asked questions, took photos, wanted answers for what they called an unprecedented event. Wild horses bonding with a human in such a profound and repeated way. Daniel smiled through most of it, but kept the deeper truth to himself. They wouldn't understand. Not really. This wasn't just about a rescue. It was about trust earned, not by force but by heart. Spirit grew stronger each week. One morning, she stood beside Luna and Titan near the tree line. Daniel knew. It was time. He walked toward her slowly. She looked back, eyes shimmering in the light. He didn't need to say goodbye. Not really. He placed a hand on her mane one last time, then stepped back. With a soft nudge from Luna, Spirit turned and galloped into the wild. No limp, no pain, just freedom. The herd followed. Titan was the last to go. He paused at the ridge, looked back at Daniel one final time. Then he vanished. Daniel stood there for a long while. And though his arms were empty, his heart had never been so full.